I'm thrilled to begin our conversation today with a young woman whose talent, optimism, and confidence in herself are positioning her to become the voice of her generation. You know her as one of the stars of the hit series Blackish, who now stars in her own spin-off called Grownish, about a young woman going off to college. In September, life will imitate art when she enrolls as a freshman in college studying history and economics in the hopes of achieving her childhood ambition of becoming a history teacher. Please welcome a woman who is embracing her ambition and someone I admire greatly, the incredible Yara Shahidi.
Hello. How are you? Hi, everybody. This is really exciting.
It's exciting. Yara has to be somewhere on the West Coast. So, Yara, thank you. She's here for a brief time with us this morning.
But I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. I have so many questions, and I know we're on a very tight time frame, but you're starting college. What are you worried about, and what are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm majoring in history, which is the social studies major in African American studies. And I mean, honestly, I think Grownish has opened my eyes to all of the other things that happen in college. I really was expecting to just go to class and go to sleep. I realize that won't be the case, but I'm really looking forward to just being in an academic community and really amongst people in which we come from different trains of thought, and it's unlike any environment that I've been in prior. And I'm also a professor stalker, and it looks like I'll have some really awesome professors, so I'm very excited.
They're lucky to have you, Yara. You know, I love James Baldwin, and when you announced you were going to college, you did it with a James Baldwin quote.
Very true.
What was that quote? And tell me about that quote.
I believe the quote was, "The paradox of education is precisely this. As one proceeds to be educated, they begin to examine the world, the society that is educating them." I'm loosely parafrasing.
But that's actually very true.
Yeah.
It's amazing. My team knows me. I'm full of quotes. And that's all I do is find great people that say great things.
But I mean, I feel like it really represents why I've wanted to go to school for so long, why education has been such a priority in my life, despite everything else that's happening. Whether it was career, whether it was family, it's always been a top priority just because it was so correlated to me being able to contribute to the world around me. And I feel like my love of history really contextualized where I am in this universe, the work that has been done that made my existence possible, the work that has to be done. And because of that, I feel like my education has really been precisely a tool or resource, so to speak, in order to expand my realm of knowledge and figure out how I can be a contributing member to this society.
I mean, bravo, Yara. And isn't it nice to come from a place of history and learn from history? Because as we know, history repeats itself over and over again. So I'm a history buff. I wish I studied it in college. I say that to my boys who are here somewhere, but I'm so excited to watch you over the next 4 years. It's going to be really exciting. One thing that I'm really obsessed with is the voting turnout in the U.S. Yara and I have talked about that a lot, or lack thereof. 52% of Americans voted. Yara, you're starting an initiative called 18 by 18. Can you tell us about it? It's so important.
Yeah, well, I think what's really funny is I think this was maybe the first conversation we had was about this idea, and it had to be more than a year before we actually launched.
Yeah, that's right.
And so
you were 16.
Yes, I was 16. Now I actually am 18, but 18 by 18 is, of course, for more than just 18-year-olds, but is primarily focused on first-time voters. If you guys don't know, we have midterms this year. Midterm elections, they are in November, and they are a very big deal. But what I realized was that oftentimes politics isn't marketed to my generation. It's really an anomaly when you have somebody who's young engaged in the world around them, just because it's convoluted, it's theoretical, it's not focused on the human, it's focused on the policy and the economic benefit, rather than like, these are the humans it's affecting. These are the platforms that we're voting on. And so to create an educationally based campaign in which we understand who's being affected and really break down from a nonpartisan place the humanity behind the topic, I feel like we could go in as informed voters. And I think the world at large, it's really important to really get all of those details and to get as much support for young voters as possible. When we look at the last election and turnout, of course, we could say like, oh, well, the other 48% should have voted, but it's so much more than that. It's, do you have an hourly job? Right now, voting is an upper middle class hobby, the way it's focused. If you have the time, money, and support to go do something, versus making it such a part of our democracy that we do what we can as a people to support one another to go practice democracy.
No, it's interesting. And when the last election happened, we did a campaign to try to challenge other CEOs to give time off to vote. Because and we did that in our company. And I think that is also part of the problem. It's what you said. People they don't want to be docked pay. They need their salaries, and we were finding that that's part of the problem as well. But at your age group, how has the reception been?
It's been really fantastic. I mean, my peers in the audience know that we come from a very engaged generation, and I'm really proud
and getting
of
more so every day, right?
Yeah, definitely. And we have this large global community, and I feel like because of social media, we really have defied the geographic borders that usually separate us, and really have paid more attention to how do we help establish our international community, and how do we find things and actions to do that really help us rise together. And because of that, I feel like it's not making sure that people are interested, because I think the interest exists. And in the launching of 18 by 18, there's just such an overwhelming load of support from peers around the country just about how they could be involved and just how important it is to have this platform. And so if anything, it was really about providing another resource or tool to people who are already wanting and craving it.
And it's a privilege to vote, let's face it. I mean, it's something that we as a democracy have that privilege. So I'm so excited you're doing that. It's so important, Yara.
Thank you.
So what does it mean for you to be a role model for other teenagers in the age of social media? Because I've heard Yara, and you're pretty spoken out about adults don't really get your voice, your generation's voice, especially on social media, which is a little embarrassing because I'm thinking back about all of my tweets and all the things on Instagram that you were like shaking your head and saying,
no.
Oh, please, my boys do it. So.
No, I mean, if anything, intergenerational support has been crucial. And I feel like...
Wait, and am I the adult in the room? And I feel like I'm 18. But what happened?
But I mean, I think what's interesting, and again, going back to my love of history, I feel like there are more parallels in anyone's life than we can imagine. And many times, social media is a new tool, and it is something that has changed really the context of the world that we're living in, of constantly, I think, having to be right, constantly having to know everything about everything there is to know.
Or people call you out right away, right?
Yeah, and so, I mean, it freaks me out, the idea of being a role model, and at the same time, it's cool that if anything that I'm doing can help inspire, thanks.
Well, but you are honestly, and I said this on the introduction, you, to me, represent the voice of your generation, Yara. That's a big thing I don't want to put any more pressure on you, but that is a big responsibility.
I mean, fortunately, though, I have to say that, like, as outspoken as I am, I'm really inspired by the fact that I have so many peers to turn to that are just as outspoken and just as vocal, and really bringing to light anything that we aren't usually covering in major media. And so I'm proud to not be the only one, but to be drowning in a sea of people who really care.
And I think the important thing we need to learn is that we need to listen to all perspectives. And somehow that's what's going to be bringing our country together, is really understanding everyone's perspectives and
Yeah.
seeing how we can find a common ground
Definitely.
and coexist.
Right, and I think what's interesting is I was, as somebody who took like every AP class one could find, I was taking I think a history class sophomore year, and I remember just reading about, what was it, the French Enlightenment or something, and just women's role in the French Enlightenment, and it was really funny because my teacher turns to me, it wasn't funny, but my teacher turns to me and goes, "Oh yeah, you really won't need to know the women, they're not testing you on it."
Wow.
But what it spoke to was, I mean, of course there's the obvious of just the idea that we're not being included in this narrative, but it really spoke to this idea that we have been institutionally taught a history that is non-inclusive. And so people live their lives truly believing that it is them and only them that has gotten them to where they are today, and feeling as though people of color and immigrants and women and people of different sexual orientations and gender expression, and the list goes on, were not a part of getting them to the space that they live in today, and we're not a part of their narrative. And because our narratives are so separate, starting from the moment that you enter kindergarten, then we really have to undo this and really showing this togetherness and layer of interdependence, because to say that the civil rights movement didn't affect everyone in this room would be a lie. Yeah. To say that any great movement didn't affect everyone in this room would be a lie, just because we are dependent on one another, and equity is something that is achieved only when we acknowledge everyone as having been unalienably given the right to exist and the right to thrive.
I'm taking notes in my mind for my next talks, Yara. I'm going to be like following your Instagram very closely. Yes, exactly. You've spoken about the emotions you felt when you visited the National Museum of African History and Culture in Washington. Tell us about that visit. What was the thing that you knew from that visit that you didn't know before? What did you learn that day?
Well, I mean, if you guys haven't gone, I highly recommend you go. It was a life-changing experience. Just because I think, as interested as I am and as much time as I take to get to know my history, my heritage, the heritage of the world around me, there's so much that we don't know. And so it was an eye-opening journey in really discovering the many leaders that I was unaware of, or even having a place. I think it was really the idea of having a space to turn to in which our history is being honored was really important. And then also just from, on a lighter level, I was there and a group of Daisy Scouts, all kindergartners, came up to me and gave me a huge hug. Oh. And it was just that beautiful moment of being able to look at the future while standing in history. And it spoke to just like the larger idea of being hopeful.
Well, it's amazing that there is that museum, and I do think there should be museums to represent all kinds of things, including women, which, if you think about it, there's not a women's museum that I know of, I'm not sure, or at least there should be one maybe in DC, even in New York. And that's something I heard a rumor about that was happening, but that is something that I think we all could agree, and men too. I said it on my introduction, men are such an important part of the equation. Women can be in a room and we all agree, but we need the other half of the population to really support equal rights for women. The fact that, what are your thoughts that we're talking about women being paid 70 cents on the dollar of a man?
I mean, what's fascinating is when you look at the fact that the 70 cents turns to 64 cents, and then it turns to even lower depending on ethnic groups and such. But I mean, quite honestly, I think what it is again, having society invest in our work as much as we invest in ourselves. And it speaks to this idea of, it's ingrained, the idea that we are not worthy of or not equal to. And when that kind of disparity is on such an insidious level, then it's hard to talk about the very social level of gender inequality, because we have to start with how much we're making and start with financial footing. And so that's why, I mean, even you being such a leader in terms of funding women's ideas is so important, because we don't oftentimes have the support to do that, and don't have the support. And so I think when we talk about gender pay. It's so much more than like we want to get paid more. No, this is
Well,
talking. Yeah, I mean, we all.
it should not be a favor. This should be a given.
Right.
And that's
It is a given. It should be a given that our work is as valuable as, because of our existence and because of the work that we've put into being there in that moment.
Yeah, no, it's really something that I think as a CEO, I feel responsible, and I think every CEO needs to take a good look at their businesses and really do the analytics and say, are the men in this company paid differently than the women? And that's something that I actually would love to mentor some business leaders on. I'm sure they would love that. But I know a lot of people that are doing that now, which is great news for all of us. But we know from research that when young girls go through puberty, their self-confidence begins to plummet. And 50% of girls feel paralyzed by fear of failure. 80% of girls feel pressure to be perfect. It's not uncommon for women to trace their unwillingness to embrace their ambition to lessons they learn at that age. So what is your advice to young women that are struggling with self-confidence today?
Well, I mean, if I can give any advice, it'd be to find our support network. And fortunately, our support network, it can be expansive, and it can be your family, it can be your friends, it can be a teacher, it can be somebody you met on Instagram, if you know that that person is who they say they are.
Yeah.
And so...
that would be good.
Yeah, but really, I feel like my support network has been crucial. And I mean, it consists
And
of...
your mother. I mean, I have my mother, and I think that's something we share is we have very wonderful mothers who are supportive and build you up. I remember when I was young and insecure, like we all are, my mother said, "You're Tory Robinson, don't you understand?" And I kept hearing that negativity is noise. So I know your mom is that support system.
Of course, she's the epicenter of the support system. But I'd have to say, being able to turn to my peers, being able to turn to people that I look up to, whether it's activists such as like Patrice Khan-Cullors, who's incredible, whoever it is, having that network of people to rely on is so important, especially because it is only natural to go through moments in which you're not questioning yourself, but it is about like, how do we recover from that? How do we really identify or pinpoint what is making us feel insecure? Is it these societal pressures? Is it the spaces that we occupy that are in which society is saying that this is not your space to be in? And having that network of people to turn to either gas you up and say like, no, you're supposed to be here, it's really important.
And I do believe that all of us have those insecurities, and that's something my mom really talked a lot about. Everyone's feeling certain insecurities about different things, and it's really how do you just be okay with being uncomfortable? That's something I say to my boys a little bit.
I mean, it's something I'm still learning how to do, because I mean, there's so many spaces that I enter as a woman, as an 18-year-old, as a person of color, as an Iranian black girl. Like, there's so many spaces that I occupy in which I'm unsure of myself. And it was so funny because I was listening to something about Imposter Syndrome, which I feel like has been like being discussed more often now. But the idea that it is so insidious that we are told that we are not worthy, and then when we get to certain positions, it feels we are questioning ourselves in those positions, forgetting the barriers that it already took for us to get there. We're questioning ourselves in these spaces, and so I feel like being aware of that has been key. Just being aware of my own bias against myself has been interesting, and figuring out how to recover from that, and also to figure out how I reassure myself and how I tell myself that I am worthy of. And sometimes that comes in the form of like a great playlist that hypes me up, and sometimes it comes in the form of like an hour-long conversation with my mother. It really depends.
Which I've been witness to.
Yes.
Private between Yara and me. But, well, okay, this question I'm really curious. Do you listen to podcasts?
Oh my God.
Okay, good. I didn't know if that was like your generational.
No. I started my college application essay with, please read this in the monotone voice of Ira Glass. From This American Life. So I listen to a lot of podcasts.
So the best podcasts and books, I'm always interested in 18-year-olds like Yara and what you're reading, and I'm always looking for a great new book.
Okay, so podcasts, I'd have to say Code Switch by NPR is fantastic. What are some other great ones? I love Pod Save America. That's a very irreverent one.
I heard about that. I haven't.
Yes. And then Hidden Brain is great. What's another? There's so many good ones. I feel like there's one called Making Oprah, which is fantastic.
Oh, wow.
Just listening to her journey. And there's so many. There's The Nod, which is fantastic. But I feel like I listen to so many, like Planet Money. Do you guys listen to Planet Money? Okay, it's so interesting because I realized like the economy is, again, not something that I feel like is just kind of ingrained in our school systems of something that we learn about, and so that's always really interesting to learn about. And then in terms of books, Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin is right now one of my favorites. Guys, if you listen to Blonde by Frank Ocean while you read Giovanni's Room, it is a fantastic experience. And then I'd have to say The Bluest Eye, Toni Morrison, Their Eyes Were Watching God.
Morrison, wow.
Mm-hmm. And then I just listened to a great one. I'm forgetting the author's name, but it's called Sing Unburied Sing. Really beautifully written. Jasmine Ward, I believe is her name. So those are some that I recommend.
Well, Yara, I can't even tell you how thankful I am to have you here today.
I'm just happy to be here.
It would not have been the same without you. This is a young woman that I admire, and I have to say, we don't actively pursue people that are actors or in a big way, just people of substance. And you have real substance. You are an amazing person that I admire greatly, and thank you for
I'm just
everything.
glad we can be in partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.